Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Psychology of Zelda, linking our world to the Legend of Zelda series. Edited by Anthony M. Bean, Ph.D. Narrated by Joe Hempel. Publisher's Note: in this audio edition, you will hear references to illustrations, figures, and charts present in the print and ebook formats of this book. This publication is unofficial and unauthorized. It has not been prepared, approved, authorized, licensed, or endorsed by any entity that created or produced the well-known Legend of Zelda video game series. Forward. Power, courage, wisdom. These three tenets comprise the foundation of Hyrule's lore and history, but they resonate just as strongly in our own society. These concepts are qualities that, at some level, each of us aspires to as we journey through life. We use power to overcome obstacles that stand before us. Our courage enables us to boldly seek out new adventures and challenges, and our wisdom bids us to search for truth. It is perhaps because these ideals are grounded in everyday life that the Legend of Zelda series has had such a strong appeal for so many people for more than 30 years. In the same way that these principles connect and unify the Triforce, the game's sacred artifact, they help connect us to the world around us, including other people who strive for these same values, and ultimately, they help us connect with other Zelda fans. The simple idea of a humble hero thrust into a chaotic and sometimes dark world, battling against the odds and ultimately finding his inner strength in order to overcome obstacles, is empowering. It encourages us to find our own inner strength and to conquer our own challenges. Yet Zelda has grown into more than just a hero's journey. It has developed into an epic fantasy full of mythology, and fans of the series can't help but dive into Hyrule and its surrounding world on a much deeper level. More personally, that yearning to go beyond the game became so strong in us that we wanted to share it with others. Not only did we seek out like-minded people who loved Zelda as we did, we were compelled to create spaces where our fellow fans could come together and share their love, ideas, stories, and theories about the games we enjoyed so deeply. The two of us independently started running Zelda websites in 2001. Our online spaces led us to connect with other people who had established similar places, other webmasters, and friendships soon developed. Eventually, a group of us decided to combine our efforts and create an even bigger and better space than we could individually. Zelda Universe was the result, and it's still going strong today. But most importantly, for the two of us, The Legend of Zelda is what led us to each other. The deep love of the series that prompted us to start websites was the catalyst that led us to us getting to know each other, first as fellow webmasters, and then as friends. Our fierce passion for the series helped stoke our sense of adventure, causing our friendship to deepen into something more. And so it was only fitting that the symbol of the Triforce featured heavily in our wedding ceremony, and we included the principles of power, courage, and wisdom in our marriage vows. Just as this series has deeply impacted our lives, so too has it touched the lives of every video gamer lucky enough to have played it. The incredible effect this franchise has had on not just us, but millions of other people is truly extraordinary. This is why we're excited about the Psychology of Zelda. To us as fans, Zelda is something that inspires and appeals to our own humanity. Both between us and within the wider Zelda community, we've had countless conversations about aspects of the franchise, from detailed critiques to outlandish theories. We've delved into stories about the games, what they mean and how they connect. To know that there are psychologists and clinicians who are having those same conversations is fascinating because, as they dissect this beloved franchise with scientific rigor, they explore just why Zelda has such an appeal to its fan base. Perhaps you have been on your own hero's journey, and The Legend of Zelda inspired you to take a courageous leap towards your personal endeavor. Or one of the games helped you through a stressful or traumatic time. Or did the battle with Dark Link stick in your mind because you, too, have been forced to conquer yourself, and you understand the need to overcome your own doubts and insecurities? Maybe you've spent time wondering exactly what all of the symbolism in Majora's Mask is about, or why the music in the series is so engaging. This book touches on these and many other topics as it journeys into the human mind, in much the same way that Link's journeys have led him into all manner of interesting places. And ultimately, no matter what Zelda means to you personally, it demonstrates with resounding clarity that yes, there really is something special about the Legend of Zelda. David and Shona Johnson, Webmasters, Zelda Universe, www.zeldauniverse.net. Introduction. It's a secret to everybody. Moblin, Legend of Zelda. With sales of video games in the billions of dollars per year, it is fairly safe to assume that almost everyone has played one, whether through their phone, computer, or on a console. Why are video games so popular? The answer lies in the field of psychology, the study of the mind, including conscious and unconscious motivations for and reasons behind our behavior. Psychology plays a particularly important role in explaining the impact of video games as a form of play and why we are so drawn to these virtual worlds to begin with. Looking at the psychology behind our favorite video games also helps us understand the characters we play as, why we pick certain games, avatars, or talents over others, and why we choose to defeat those crummy monsters time and time again. Ultimately, the psychology surrounding video games helps us understand the video gamer and the influences video games may have upon them. Since the release of the original Legend of Zelda in 1986, millions of video gamers around the world have taken up Link's sword and shield in hopes of defeating Ganon and becoming the savior of Hyrule. In total, over 75 million copies of Zelda games have been sold, including more than 19 different titles across 12 video game systems. This long-standing, widespread popularity and the game's themes of heroicism, struggle, and triumph make the Legend of Zelda series an excellent model for better understanding psychological theory and our own psychological makeup. Each of the Legend of Zelda video games finds the same or similar characters in the same virtual world, although with various beginnings and timelines. Yet, rather than losing interest because of the repetition, we continue to be drawn to these games again and again. Why have we fallen in love with this franchise? What psychological elements are at work while we're playing these games? Why do we relate to particular characters and storylines? These questions have been burning in the minds of those of us who have fallen in love with the Zelda games and wish to know why they speak to us. This book will answer these questions and more. This collection's expert writers, chosen for both their love of the games and their knowledge of psychological concepts, provide a primer on the psychological concepts encountered and experienced by players throughout the Legend of Zelda series. These concepts help provide a more nuanced understanding of the complex psychological draw of this specific game. They help us to see why the Legend of Zelda series in particular resonates so strongly with its players. From the undertaking of the hero's journey at the start of each game, to understanding the orphan archetype and its unconscious pull to the player, this book dives into the psychological reasons why we, as players, gravitate toward Link. Have you ever noticed that Link doesn't speak in his own story? This book explains why that's so important. Did playing Majora's Mask help you deal with your own grief or depression? This book explains that experience too. What about that pesky Shadow Link? What does he represent within us? How about the way Princess Zelda herself has evolved over the course of the series? What roles do the hero, goddess, and villain archetypes play in the game, and how do we experience them in our real lives? Why is the music of Zelda so powerful and immersive that we readily recall or hum its themes even after we put down the controller? This book has answers to all these questions, while continuing to ask new ones about Link and his comrades. Take this book, as it's dangerous to go through this journey alone, and be armed with the understanding and knowledge of why we, as video gamers, love this series so. Hoist up your Hylian shield and the Master Sword and continue forth, if you wish to not just remember the different Legend of Zelda games, but discover more about yourself and the virtual world in which we spend so many hours playing. I hope you find the same enjoyment in listening to this book that we experienced while playing, reliving, and writing about these games. Embodying the Virtual Hero. A Link to the Self. Jonathan Erickson. A sword wields no strength unless the hand that holds it has courage. Hero's Shade. Twilight Princess. Anyone who loves the Legend of Zelda series has likely, at some point, known the experience of truly becoming the hero Link. Even if only for a few precious moments, your complicated human life was forgotten as you came to identify totally with this young man of humble origins, growing in strength and skill as he journeyed through the imaginal kingdom of Hyrule to face and thwart the forces that would destroy it. In the earliest of the game's incarnations, this salvation of the realm was tied to rescuing a kidnapped and helpless Zelda, princess of the kingdom, though as the mythos has developed in the 3 decades since, Zelda has gradually become a partner rather than a victim, an incarnation and descendant of the goddess Hylia, who, with the hero's help, could seal away the demon Ganon, restoring peace to the realm. As the eons have passed, this cycle has happened again and again. Each time, when the moment came, Link rose to serve the princess and face the darkness. And each time a human player picks up a new game in the Zelda series, this is the invitation, to take up the mantle of the hero once more, to become the unlikeliest of heroes, a boy named Link. Psychology has much to say about this experience of the player becoming Link. One promising place to start is the concept of projection, whereby an individual projects certain psychological aspects of themselves outward onto something in the world, or in this case, the virtual world of Hyrule. Behavioral research into avatars and identity offers another piece to the puzzle, particularly when considered in tandem with the concept of theory of mind from cognitive psychology, which seeks to understand how the mind understands and imagines other minds apart from itself. Of course, there are many games that make use of these 3 principles to invite the player to identify with the protagonist, but The Legend of Zelda was one of the first to do so, and is still one of the most effective. The Voiceless Hero. It has been a consistent feature across the 30 years of Legend of Zelda games that Link is a decidedly silent protagonist. In the decade of the earliest Zelda games, long before voice acting became commonplace in video games, the protagonist's voice was largely a moot point. However, as technology has progressed and characters in video games have started talking, Link's continued silence is more strongly felt. It is especially apparent in the most recent incarnation, Breath of the Wild, in which a fully voiced Zelda carries on long conversations with Link, while he responds with resolutely stoic silence, and it is a testament to the game creator's skill that these scenes remain emotionally resonant. This silence on the part of the hero is a very deliberate choice by the designers. Series creator Shigeru Miyamoto has said that he wants the players to feel as if they are Link, and that introducing a voice actor or even scripted text would interfere with this identification. In essence, without a voice, Link becomes a semi-blank slate that the player can psychologically project onto. In psychology, the concept of projection refers, broadly speaking, to the phenomenon of an individual projecting an aspect of their personality, self or inner world outward onto an external person or object, usually without conscious awareness. The concept originated in early 20th century depth psychology, a branch of psychology that focuses on the relationship between the conscious and unconscious mind. Psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who is widely regarded as the father of depth psychology, originally viewed projection in a mostly negative light, as a process whereby an individual's disowned thoughts and feelings were attributed to others. So, for example, an unconsciously selfish person might accuse others around him of being selfish, or a person who cannot tolerate feeling weak and helpless might react with hostility to even the smallest sign of weakness in her friends. Freud's protege and later rival, Carl Jung, a psychoanalyst best known for his theory of archetypes and the collective unconscious, developed a more expansive concept of projection. Jung suggested that projection is ubiquitous in human life. All the contents of our unconscious are constantly being projected onto our surroundings. He noted also that unless we are possessed of an unusual degree of self-awareness, we shall never see through our projections. That is to say, our unconscious ideas about ourselves and even the world are constantly being projected outward to meet us in external form. For Jung, projection was a kind of bridge between the inner and outer worlds, allowing us to enrich our mundane lives with inner meaning. Incidentally, this bridge between worlds is also implied in the name, Link. He exists as a connecting bridge, a link between the player's inner world and the imaginal kingdom of Hyrule. In the Jungian conception, projection can be beneficial or destructive. Because we project all the time, all human relationships begin with a significant amount of projection. Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz went so far as to say that deep relationships could never begin without projection as their starting point. At first, one has to project, or there is no contact. Philosophically speaking, you cannot relate without projection. The secret to navigating this initial state of projection in relationships, in Jungian theory at least, is that with time we must all learn to withdraw our projections, to claim what we were once projecting outward as an aspect of the self, not of the other. In this way, we eventually truly get to know our friends and partners, as well as come to have a deeper awareness of ourselves. Strange as it might sound, something similar occurs when a video game player has the experience of becoming Link. The player takes their own questing inner hero and projects it outward into the interactive story of the game. The silent protagonist holds the projection, and as the player travels and explores the virtual kingdom of Hyrule, battling enemies and growing stronger, they experience their own heroic nature coming to fruition. This experience is one of the principal joys of the game, and this sense of connection through projection is part of what makes the Zelda series innately meaningful for so many of its players. As thrilling as it may be to enter so fully into a fictional character, Jungian psychology suggests there is something even more important going on in the act of projection, an opportunity for psychological growth. When all is said and done, when the hero is victorious and the player puts down the controller and walks away, the player has the opportunity to take a little piece of that heroic journey back out into the world. By withdrawing the projection when the story ends, the player reclaims the hero as part of the self by remembering what it feels like to embody heroism, agency, and victory. The game begins with the player projecting a bit of their self onto the hero, and in the end, the hero Link becomes a part of who they are. This means a virtual trip to Hyrule can provide players with growth opportunities that the physical world might not. Most people will experience at some points in their lives periods when they do not feel able to face the challenges before them. Whether it is a child being bullied on a playground, or a business owner facing steep competition, sometimes life presents challenges that seem beyond what we are equipped to handle. Time spent embodying the virtual hero can open a space for new possibilities to emerge, preventing us from becoming emotionally stuck in the present-time narrative of difficult conditions. By playing the role of the hero, one gains a small bit of familiarity with what it is like to live into those more courageous and assertive possibilities. Confidence, perseverance, and triumph become lived experiences, rather than distant impossibilities. Theory of mind and virtual bodies. Theory of mind, which was mentioned briefly earlier, is a technical term in cognitive psychology that refers to the ability of one's mind to recognize that other minds exist, the ability to look at another person and be able to ascribe to them thoughts, feelings, experiences, and motivations different from one's own. While this ability might seem obvious to most of us, theory of mind emerges as a unique cognitive capacity when one considers circumstances in which its function is diminished, as in some cases of schizophrenia, autism, or brain damage. Very young children initially have difficulty identifying and distinguishing other minds, and gaining the ability to do so is a developmental milestone. Theory of mind doesn't just apply to other human beings. It can also be used to attribute minds to non-humans, animals, computers, or even fictional characters. Literary scholar Lisa Zunshine argues that one of the chief purposes of literature is to stimulate our capacities in this respect. One can easily see the parallels between books and video games. As readers engage and get to know imaginary characters and observe them relating to each other, those readers are strengthening their ability to understand minds other than their own. Zunshine writes, "On some level, our evolved cognitive architecture indeed does not fully distinguish between real and fictional people. Of course, other parts of the brain are quite good at discerning real persons from fictitious ones, but insofar as an individual allows themselves to become absorbed in a fictional world, they begin to experience its characters as if they were real. Thus, when in Breath of the Wild the player watches Zelda express her doubts that she is truly the heir to the power that will contain the darkness, their theory of mind system is at work, figuring out who she is and what she wants. This is even more the case when Link responds to Zelda's concerns with attentive but stoic silence. These same brain systems presume that he is thinking something and allow the player to imagine what he is thinking. Zelda tells us her thoughts outright. In Link's case, the player is invited to fill his silence with whatever they imagine Link's thought process would be. For the most part, this projection happens implicitly. The natural tendency is to imagine that Link is thinking whatever the player is thinking as he or she listens to the tormented princess's words. But it is one thing to imagine the thoughts of a silent character, and quite another to feel that one has become that character. This is where the question of identification with virtual bodies comes into play. Unlike a movie or a novel, video games allow individuals to physically and psychically take control of characters as the story proceeds. At the simplest level, this means making choices about what those characters do next. As games have grown more sophisticated, video gamers have gained increasingly more nuanced and complex control over characters' bodies. In the original Legend of Zelda, Link's movements are quite limited. Walk in one of 4 directions, thrust the sword, shoot an arrow, place a bomb, and so on. 30 years later, Link's movements are too numerous to list as he runs, crawls, climbs, swims, and glides through a 3-dimensional world, wielding different weapons with different ranges, speeds, and movement styles. Mastering the use of Link's body and weapons requires a learning process similar to learning to play the piano or ride a bicycle. Players' existing brain maps for taking action in the real world gradually become linked to new actions in the virtual world. Through practice, new activities recruit more sophisticated neural networks. The experience of playing the game becomes more nuanced, and the experience of becoming Link grows more real to the player. By playing long enough and deep enough, players may even begin to form new brain maps to more fully embody this digital figure. Around the time the original Legend of Zelda was released, virtual reality pioneer Jaron Lanier was conducting experiments on humans learning to control non-human bodies in immersive virtual environments. He found that with training, a human could learn to effectively operate a body as alien and complex as an 8-limbed lobster. Since then, a large body of evidence has emerged that shows the degree to which humans can come to identify with virtual avatars through repeated use. It should be noted that in these studies, the term identification is used differently from the way it is used in literary or film studies. In the latter, we might say we identify with a character in a film or novel if their words, actions, or circumstances remind us of ourselves. When researchers talk about identification with a virtual body, they mean it more literally, as coming to experience the virtual body as one's own, an extension of the self in real time. The more time someone spends learning to control a lobster body, the more they come to think of that body as an extended part of their self. Although the Legend of Zelda games to date do not take place in the kind of fully immersive virtual reality that Lanier's experiments did, the same basic principles of virtual body identification are at work in the player's experience with Link. Virtual reality exists on a spectrum of player immersion and engagement, and Breath of the Wild, for example, certainly ranks among the most immersive worlds available to players today, even without a VR headset and haptic gloves. Immersion might be best understood as becoming completely absorbed into a world, and it can happen in a variety of ways. Certainly, blocking out sensory stimulation from the external world helps to do this. Moving one's head in all directions while wearing a VR headset and experiencing the field of vision change in response is also a powerful tool to create this immersion. But these are only two of many different ways of creating immersion. Traveling through an expansive digital world full of varied terrain and realistic physics is another means of immersion, even if it occurs on a flat screen. Furthermore, the more deeply we come to master the movement and actions of the avatar we have been given within that digital world, the more likely we are to experience ourselves as immersed in it. This kind of deep, embodied immersion in the game environment is an example of the experience of flow. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who first coined the term as a psychological concept in his 1990 book, Flow, describes flow as a state of optimal experience, where one becomes gracefully and effortlessly absorbed in a task. This is the state whereby expert athletes become completely immersed in their sport, taking intuitive action in the moment without conscious evaluation or abstract thought, or in which a musician is completely immersed in the activity of creating music. So, too, can this state be experienced by the video game player once they have learned to effortlessly make Link run, jump, climb, aim and shoot arrows, attack, and defend. In fact, this plethora of refinable actions sets the stage for immersive flow. In a recent study, psychologist Alistair Souter and video game researcher Michael Hitchens found that video game players' experience of flow states directly correlated with their sense of identification with the game characters. The more deeply the player is able to get into the game through controlling a character's actions and choices, the more mastery they achieve in moving the virtual body, the more likely a sense of identification with that character will occur. At the intersection of theory of mind and identification with the virtual body, we find the old depth psychological concept of projection resurgent. The imagined mind of the fictional hero Link becomes identified with the player's self through the player's ability to control Link's complex embodied actions. The more deeply the player becomes immersed in the game, the more likely they are to experience flow states where the time spent learning to take effective action as Link translates into implicit mastery. The flow state in turn reinforces character identification. But the player does not merely identify with certain aspects of Link as they would if they encountered him in a novel or film. In video games, they can go even deeper and become the character, both physically and psychologically, through immersion in his dexterous virtual body. Building character. Of course, not every player will experience this sort of deep identification with Link, even if they find some casual enjoyment in the Legend of Zelda games. And this is to be expected. Not all characters appeal to all people, and some players will have more of a psychological predisposition toward becoming Link than others. Young posited that often the object offers a hook to the projection and even lures it out. That is to say, individuals project their inner life onto an external object if it is a reasonable match for the contents of that inner life. For millions of players, Link has fulfilled this role. However, inevitably he will not hook everyone. Link's silence creates a greater space for projection, but he is not a pure blank slate. There are elements of Link's many incarnations that make it easier or harder for a particular individual to identify with him. Some players may be turned off by his elf-like appearance, complete with pointy ears and often green tunic. Others may not like that he's often portrayed as being small, even childish, instead of a strapping image of traditional mature masculinity. Link is often quite weak at the beginning of the story, and while one of the principal pleasures of the game can be the experience of growing stronger over time, in the beginning some players may be put off by this initial weakness. On an even more basic level, the fact that Link is uncompromisingly white and male will impact different players in different ways, that many Zelda players don't automatically identify with Link's whiteness and maleness, for instance, might provide an extra hurdle for some in the process of identifying with the hero. The question of the effect of Link's whiteness is especially intriguing, given that the Zelda series has from the beginning been developed by a Japanese company and the rest of the world.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?